Welcome to the Savvy Leader Podcast. We're so excited to have you here. This is the perfect place for leadership growth, learning, and inspiration. Let's get started. Welcome, everyone, to this week's edition of the Savvy Leader Podcast. We are so grateful and honored to have Stephanie Page here from the Stories Foundation. She is the executive director. She's been there almost 10 years, and she's got a history of philanthropy and other community action, and we cannot wait to hear her story. So let's go ahead and just dive right in. Hi, Stephanie.
Hi, so good to be here.
Thank you so much again for taking time out of your day to spend it with us. All right, so I can't wait to hear, like I mentioned, the story. I know a little bit about how Stories Foundation came about, but I want to hear from you again. If you could just enlighten us about how it came about, what led to the creation of Stories Foundation, and just share a little bit of that background with us.
Yeah, so I actually was just on a call before I came on to meet with you, and I think people expect that you start an anti-human trafficking organization because you have personal experience with human trafficking, and that really wasn't that's not my story. And my mom and I, who we co-founded Stories Foundation together, we were on a road trip, and my mom got a free book on her Kindle that she was reading, and it was about modern day slavery, human trafficking, actually coming out of the Sudan, and children who were being recruited to be child soldiers in their civil wars, and then the women, and it was horrific. And my background is I'd done some international travel and done some flood relief work when Hurricane Katrina happened and flooding in Iowa. And I'm a person of faith, and I said a prayer and I said, this is not okay. Like, how is this happening? And something has to be done about it. And I swear God said, yeah, what are we going to do about that? And so that's really where it was born. And my family had joked for a long time about wanting to start a coffee shop because we love coffee. And at the time, we followed a pastor in DC, Mark Batterson, and he has a coffee shop, and all the profit goes to missions. And so we very naively, I'll say, thought, well, we could do that. I mean, literally not knowing anything about human trafficking, barely, except what was in this book. Not knowing really anything about starting a business either, or a nonprofit for that matter, thought, well, if we started a coffee shop, we could give money away to help fight human trafficking. And that's where the idea was birthed. And it has been a journey since then, for sure.
Oh, that is so incredible. I love the inspiration of just the free book that just came about and just the life-changing stories that you read. That's so incredible. Tell me a little bit about some of the initial challenges you had when you were establishing the Stories Foundation. So you and your mom co-founded together?
Yeah, so we had the idea. This was in 2012 in like July, and um, there were some things personally that happened that we ended up living together, which is so interesting. It's an interesting part of the story because I think that if my family hadn't moved with my parents at that time, I don't know if we'd be sitting here having this conversation today, because us being in the same space meant this idea kept coming up, and we kept talking about it, like, are we really going to do this? Like, are we really going to do it? And we decided, yeah, we really were going to do it. And so at the time, I ran a company that put on events for like youth events, women's events. And so we started with awareness. We did an awareness conference, and we did that for 2013, 2014, 2015, before we officially became a nonprofit in 2015. The biggest challenge at the beginning that I did not anticipate was I thought that my community I was in would be 100% on board. I thought that they would hear about human trafficking like I did. They would think, this is horrible, we need to do something, and then they would like be so excited to learn more and to do whatever they could and to jump on board. And that just wasn't the case. It just wasn't the case. It was so, and it's still, even after all these years and all the reactions I've gotten and all the speaking and all the people I've met, I still feel a little like baffled at the feelings of being ignored, of, putting this out there that this is a thing and that this is something we were going to do, and we decided we were going to do it, and just people pretending like it wasn't real. And being the kind of person I am, I really am a jump first, think later. That's more my style. And so right away, I started a Facebook page and I put it out. We found a name and we got a logo and we did a website. And those are all things that were in my wheelhouse. That marketing stuff had been things I'd done. So that was easy for me to put all that together. So people knew about it. It's not like it was a secret. And still people just weren't very supportive. And so that was probably my biggest challenge at the beginning, for sure.
Did you find that to be discouraging or just kind of deflating or?
All of that, because, I wouldn't say I was part of a huge community. Like we all have. I think we all have our communities and they're close knit, and you really only have the people that you have. I remember I was a part of another company and one of the founders said, well, you have to find your people. And I remember thinking, what do you mean find your people? Like, you're just given the people you have. Like, how do you, and I get it now. You have to put yourself out there and find the people whose heart, you have heart connection with and share. You can tell when you share that passion or that motive, your motivations are the same. But back then I was like, I only have the people that are here. Like, you just have what you have. And so that it was very discouraging and yeah, deflating would be a really good word. But what happened in those first couple of years for me is I began to research human trafficking, and I began to research human trafficking locally, and it changed my whole life. I mean, it changed the way I saw the world. It changed my understanding, and I couldn't look away. Like, I couldn't unlearn what I learned, and I couldn't not move forward in what I felt like I was supposed to do, even though nobody was really going with me. I mean, just a few people, right? Not the great support I thought that I would have. So, yeah.
That listening to you talk like that gives me chills, literally. It's just so profound how things can shift in our lives. And you're right. Once you see, you can't unsee. And there are some things that you can't deny. So I applaud your perseverance. So tell us a little bit about, the initial mission and focus and where the name came from for Stories Foundation.
Yeah. So Stories Foundation, originally the idea was live your story confidently. So see the story that you've been given and see the value in it. Share it generously. So when we share a story with each other, whether that's literally sharing our stories that connects us to each other, sharing our resources, whether that's financial or experiential, right? We all have resources that we've been given. Then that's when we see stories change. So live, share, change. Live your story, share your story, and we'll see the stories of injustice change around us. And really this idea that issues like human trafficking can be very overwhelming, and we can feel like there's nothing that we can do individually, but really every single story matters. And when we use our voice and we use what's been given to us, we can create change for, just one person at a time. Originally I thought that there must be other people doing anti-human trafficking work and I must be behind. Like I never thought that what was the reality was that the laws in 2012 were just changing in Minnesota to even identify people under 24 as victims who were being prostituted. Prior to 2012, if you were arrested and you were like 16 and you were on the streets and you were being prostituted, you were treated as a criminal, not a victim, and you got put in jail, where the person purchasing you would just get a fine of like a couple $100. And so what I didn't realize is that that was all new change in 2012 when I learned about human trafficking. And so at the beginning, we wanted to just have a coffee shop and give money away to organizations doing the work, and just realized there weren't enough organizations doing the work, and there was a huge gap for that work. So I sometimes I laugh at myself because I really just wanted to be behind the scenes, and like I feel out of my depth, which I think most leaders, if we're all honest, we would say we are out of our depth. But wow, I'm grateful for the journey for sure. And I feel very humbled every day with the opportunities that come and the people that we get to walk alongside. So.
Wow. So then, well, let's talk a little bit about, so Stories Foundation, basically you're here to fight human trafficking and exploitation. And so what kind of core programs or initiatives do you guys work on all the time? Do you have some ongoing programs, or how do you like to go about this important work?
Yeah, so we have 3 ways that we do that. We do awareness work, which is general awareness in the community. We do prevention work with kids and teens and families. And then we work along with survivors, and we come alongside them and help them tell their stories when they are ready for that, and come alongside in whatever way we can. I just scheduled a meeting with somebody who wants to start a home, and she's coming out of someplace in her own story. And so it's as diverse as human beings are, that the ways we come alongside survivors, it can be very tangible, like car repairs, and it can be more big picture, like, what do I do next? I want to be an advocate. How do I create a resume and, a speaker sheet and, all of that. So with awareness, we go into community groups. We do community events. We have some events coming up this month that we'll host to help people understand what human trafficking looks like locally here today. I had a guy come into the cafe that we started yesterday, and he said he got his coffee and it was early and it was rainy yesterday. So I was a little groggy, and he goes, "So human trafficking is a really big issue here, huh?" And I said, "Yes, it is." And we had a little 10-minute awareness talk about human trafficking and what it looks like. And so we want to bring that general awareness to people. And then with prevention, we talk about healthy and unhealthy relationships with kids and teens so that they can identify the difference. I think we have normalized manipulation, and manipulation is just the beginning on a spectrum towards exploitation and human trafficking. And so we need to equip our kids to be able to understand what unhealthy is, so that they can advocate for themselves and their peers when they're in these relationships that turn very abusive quite often. So that's what we do.
That's so incredible. And I know you work tirelessly in the community to spread that awareness. And you touched a little bit about one of your newest initiatives and so please share with us your most recent endeavor.
Yeah. So that idea we had, I don't know, back in 2012, random idea to have a coffee shop. We got to see it become reality this year, which is just, I just could cry about it right now. It's been so beautiful. So we opened Storyteller Cafe in Blaine, Minnesota on April 1st. No April Fool's joke. It's real. It happened. And Storyteller Cafe is a hub for all of our work. So it's a hub for our awareness events and a hub for fundraising to help fund the work that we do. It's where survivors are getting jobs. We have a survivor working right now and another one that I'm interviewing this week, where the goal in the future is to have job training and then housing that kind of branches off from the cafe. But yeah, we get to have a little retail space where we sell survivor made goods. We partner with other organizations. I had someone drop off a bunch of books today that are related to people who are in prison and victims of exploitation and abuse in that sphere. So yeah, it's just this beautiful community space where people can come in, they feel valued, they can get resources. We want to be a place that has those healthy conversations and brings this topic to light in a way that we don't feel overwhelmed, but we see the steps that we can take to create change. So it's happy.
And I've been there, and the beverages are amazing, and the sandwiches are great. It's a beautiful, calm, peaceful place. I love spending time there. And I think what really hits me or hits my heart the most when you talk about your story is you're not just out here raising money. You're not just, you're getting engaged with the survivors. You're offering to lift them up and help them move forward.
And I think that that in itself is just so commendable in the sense that I can't imagine how broken someone must feel after that experience. And, to find an organization like yours to help them along that journey, it just really, really drives home the importance of organizations like yours in our community. With that though, so here we are in Minnesota. We're not a border town. We're in the Midwest. It gets really cold in the winter. It doesn't seem like the ideal place for, things like this to go on. So to share a little bit about, what you're finding in our communities and maybe some common misconceptions, or maybe people just aren't really understanding just what exactly human trafficking and exploitation is.
Yeah, I think one of the more common misconceptions about human trafficking is that it looks like kidnapping. And um, more often than not, it doesn't look like kidnapping, and it's not kidnapping. It happens through force, fraud, or coercion. So it's when someone is lured or forced or coerced into a life that they wouldn't choose. And really, it happens within relationships. So we all have vulnerabilities. And I think in the past, when we think of people being vulnerable, we maybe think of their vulnerability because of their lack of adequate housing or their lack of food or job insecurity and things like that. And those are for sure things that make a person vulnerable. But what we're seeing now, the vulnerabilities that are being exploited are those emotional vulnerabilities that every single one of us has. The need to be seen, to know that we're valued, that we have purpose, that we're loved, that we matter. And these are core to every single human being. And so what's happening is that there are people out there who learn to spot these vulnerabilities in people, and maybe maybe it's teenagers who have great parents, but they want to be seen and loved and valued, like that's like super normal for that age. Or maybe it's somebody who does have a lack because of a situation within a family or whatever. And so they're trained to spot these people with these vulnerabilities that are more extreme and maybe don't have that community around them. And then they create relationships with them and they meet their needs for a time with the express purpose of exploiting them later. So they'll be in a relationship with somebody with the purpose of earning their trust anywhere from 3 months, 6 months, even a year, 2 years. One of the survivors that I've read her book and met her, she's local here. She was in a relationship for 2 years before what we call the turn happened, and the extreme abuse and exploitation and direct trafficking began. Now, it wasn't a healthy relationship per se, but it wasn't a trafficking relationship. And so they really do put the time in to gain trust. And then once the trust is there, that's when the turn happens and they begin maybe with sex trafficking specifically, they'll say, we really need the money. Will you go strip for me or whatever? And then the extreme abuse happens. Maybe it's a gang rape, but it's all very strategic and it's planned. And then they use shame to keep somebody enslaved. You're not worth anything. No one's ever going to want you. And during the time of grooming and that building trust, they've isolated them from whatever community they might have had, whatever people who would have been healthy for them. So then they say, your people aren't going to want you anymore. Look what you've done. While also saying, I love you. We're going to have a life together. And so it's a mind. I think we can think it's like a physical prison, but what it is it's really a prison of your mind and of your emotions. So when you think about human trafficking in those terms, I think all of a sudden that can open up our understanding that this is happening all around us. I think you probably don't have to think too hard to think of somebody that has been trapped in an abusive relationship, an unhealthy relationship. And the difference between exploitation and human trafficking is a very fine line. Human trafficking, there's 3 people involved. So there's a trafficker and a victim and a buyer. Whereas exploitation, there's 2 people. And it's just the difference between if I'm a 14-year-old girl and I'm homeless and somebody comes up to me and says, I have someplace for you to sleep tonight. And I say, okay. And then I go with them and they say, okay, but in order to stay here, you have to sleep with me. That's exploitation. And it becomes trafficking if you say, okay, in order for you to stay here, you have to sleep with him. So then it becomes trafficking because a third person entered. And so when you start to think of it like this, all of a sudden it's like, oh, we have people being used for their bodies all over the place. Our whole culture promotes using people for their bodies, or that our worth and our value comes from our relationships and all of these things. It just, you begin to see that it's a lot more prevalent than you would think.
Yeah, I think the work that you do in the schools is so important. It sounds like that getting to these kids before they get into these kinds of situations has got to be just so crucial to their well-being and their safety. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. I mean, and it
Yeah.
does just open your mind up to a whole new perspective. It's not like what you see in the movies. It's not, what you expect necessarily. And it doesn't start out that way. And I don't think people think about that either. So when we're looking at young people in our world, perhaps, paying close attention to those relationships that seem to be maybe not healthy, and stepping in when we can, because, you just never know. You just never know. And I got to believe social media has got to play a huge part in this.
Yeah, huge, because you don't see the person on the other end of the screen, on the other end of the Roblox game, or behind Snapchat or Instagram or TikTok or whatever. And so for sure, kids are being targeted and they don't recognize that the person is dangerous. And yeah, to your point about being aware, I have teenagers, and I think what I've learned personally in conjunction with doing this work is that when I create a relationship where my kids feel safe and they can communicate with me about their life, then I earn a place to not say, oh, don't do that, but to ask questions and be like, wait, what did he say to you? Or like, how did that make you feel? Or like, what do you think about that? Or we say a lot at our house, like, that's not healthy. Like, that's not like, and just this idea that we have infinite worth and value, and that it's not worth it to exchange a momentary, moment of maybe pleasure of someone seeing you, even though it's not like authentic, kindness, for abuse, really. I mean, we have really glorified abuse, and we're not, and I think I'm Minnesotan and I'm from here, so I can't speak for everyone, but I do know in Minnesota, we don't like to talk about the hard things. We would rather not butt into people's business, but the consequences of that is we don't talk about hard things. And if we don't talk about them, then things happen underneath the surface that are extremely abusive and harmful. And we have a lot of hurting people that don't feel like they can share the truth about their story, and also weren't given the information to make a better choice. And so something that we really talk about a lot at Stories is that our stories matter, and to create space for people to share authentically, and for us to process our own stories. We all have trauma, whether it's, sexual trauma or relationship trauma, or just trauma from living in the world. And are we allowing ourselves to grieve and to, hold space for that? I think all of that really matters, because traffickers, like I said, they're going to look for those vulnerabilities in people, those pain points, and they will come in and meet those needs and have no problem doing that, because they're going to benefit later. So could we do that for each other in authentic ways? It would make a huge difference.
Oh my gosh. So what are some other really effective strategies we could use to, help or prevent, or what can we do as just the average person?
Yeah, I think the first thing is to be aware. So if this conversation feels very new for you, we would love to come out and talk about it more, and talk more about what this looks like and how we can become more aware. And then have conversations with the people in your life. And like I said, I've been doing this since like 2012, 2013. So my kids were little then. But right away I started asking questions like, did you feel uncomfortable when you were at a friend? Like anywhere they went, literally anywhere they went, we just normalized the conversations around, did you feel uncomfortable? Was everything okay? Did you change in the bathroom? Did you keep your clothes on? Like, even if it wasn't a sleepover, it was just like, and just anywhere they went, I just normalized these conversations when they were little. And so now as they're getting older and they're in their, I have an 18-year-old and an almost 16-year-old and a 12-year-old and a 9-year-old. Like,
Oh, wow.
yeah, now it's normal for me to ask these questions and we have these conversations. I don't think it's ever too young to just say the hard things. And for me as an adult, it's way more uncomfortable for me to ask the questions than it is for my kid to hear them. And also me sacrificing my own comfort opens the door for them also to say uncomfortable things. And I think I just can't emphasize enough building relationship, authentic relationship where you open the door and you lead the way. Like, you can't expect somebody to be vulnerable with you unless you lead in vulnerability, right? And so we lead the way in vulnerability. We create safe spaces where people aren't going to feel like they're shamed, but they know they're loved, so that we can have these important conversations. So those are really, really huge. And then this gentleman that was in the shop the other day, after we talked a little bit about what human trafficking was, all of a sudden he goes, well, actually, I had this experience. And he goes on to tell me about how this woman came up to him in a parking lot, in the Whole Foods parking lot. And it felt scammy what she was asking him for money. But he couldn't leave it alone, and something wasn't right about her. And I'm like, yeah, your gut was probably correct there. And they ended up calling the police and all these things. And so I think that we don't recognize when we see something that doesn't set right with us, pay attention to that. Take notes. If there's a car, write down a license plate. Let law enforcement know. If you need a specific law enforcement who's trained to know about human trafficking and exploitation, you can reach out to us. We can connect you to those people. But once we start to be more aware of the people around us, we're going to see things that don't set right, and we can take action by way of collecting information and reaching out to law enforcement and things like that. There are things we can do, but that starts with that awareness of others and of the issues.
Well, and yeah, just paying attention and taking even just small actions. If something doesn't sit right, listen to your gut. It doesn't hurt anything, to inquire or to look into things further. But I love the idea of, because one of my next questions was, is there any age too young to start kind of establishing these relationships with your young people in your life? And so it was nice to hear that, those kinds of questions you could ask at any age. There's no reason why you couldn't ask if they felt comfortable, if they had a sleepover, different situations. There are ways we can ask these questions that are age appropriate.
And not alarming. We don't need to make anyone, if they go, yeah, mom, it was great, it was fun, then you're like, great, that's great, awesome. If you don't make it weird, they're not going to feel weird. And so it's really our adult issue that we feel weird, so we just have to tell ourselves to calm down and
breathe.
Yeah. And honestly, my kids, this generation coming up, because of social media, but maybe because of COVID, and we weren't socialized there for a couple of years. There's a lot there, but there's a lot of unhealth they're in relationships at a young age. My 9-year-old just finished 3rd grade, and there's a lot of relationship dynamics in 3rd grade, and for sure we should be teaching at 6, 7, 8, 9 about how to be kind and how to be have generous assumptions, and when someone is unkind, how to walk away, and not to cancel someone, but you can walk away. You don't have to be how to teach boundaries. You don't have to be best friends with that person. These are things we can most definitely be talking about with our kids. So
yeah, it's just a little bit different perspective than probably what we would have anyway, because we're always going to want our kids to hang around, some well-behaved kids. It's hard when you see your kids getting tangled up in the wrong kind of crowd and they start getting in trouble. So, catching it ahead of time, because we're being aware for more than one reason, because there's more to the story. Well, look what I did there. Stories. Okay. Well, that's fantastic, but I cannot wait to hear, what are your future plans and goals for the Stories Foundation? I'm a big supporter, and I can't wait to hear what I get to support coming up.
Yeah, we're excited. So for a long time we wanted to do housing, and so that's definitely still top priority for us. We would really like to find something in the northern suburbs that we could renovate. So I always put it out there. If anyone wants to donate a house, that would be so great. We would love to have apartments. So I feel pretty passionate about apartment living because it offers dignity for adult women who are coming out of trafficking, exploitation, and abuse, to give them their own space. And then also gives us versatility if somebody has children or if there is someone of a different gender that needs a place to stay, we could possibly provide that if we have apartments. So it's more expensive on the front end to build apartments than to just have a house. But I think in the long run, it's more impactful. So that is something that we are still looking at and thinking about. And then also creating a job training program as part of that housing. So we make products that we have in the shop that we sell, and we, like I said, we have a few survivors that work with us within the cafe. So that's also part of it, is creating that job training program, and what does that look like. So those are things immediately. Getting connected with more survivors and really just asking the question, what can we do? And doors are opening, and that feels really encouraging for me, really encouraging. So
that's so great. This one big, huge accomplishment, I think is just so incredible. And like you just said, now doors are opening more. So I'm really, really hopeful that some of your big dreams and visions can start to really come to fruition. That'd be so great. So housing but apartments more so. I think you've mentioned before that you're one of the few that offers housing or is able to accommodate women or people with children, or even pets, or no,
if it's an apartment, then those are the kinds of things that we can do, right? Currently for adult women coming out of human trafficking, there are just very few options. And every time that we have a survivor that's looking for housing, it's incredibly difficult and pretty much impossible to find them a placement. They're just, what we do have is always full. So it's a huge need. It specifically for over 24 adult women coming out of any kind of abuse, but specifically trafficking, exploitation. There's just barely anything available. So, yeah.
Okay. Well, that's good to know. And now, most importantly, how can we support Stories Foundation? How can we get involved? I know you've got all kinds of initiatives and different ways we can do that. So share some of those.
Yeah, well, low-hanging fruit is come see us if you're local. Come see us at Storyteller Cafe. Have your meetings there. It's space that's beautiful and available, and you can bring your groups or talk to us about renting it out or whatever you need. And then if you have a community, between 5 to 10 people even that you want to educate about human trafficking, I'd love to come out, or you could host them at the cafe and we can have a conversation about human trafficking. We want to continue to spread awareness because there are still so many people who don't really understand the intricacies of local human trafficking and what anti-human trafficking work looks like locally. And then we always are looking for financial partners. So you could become a monthly donor. You could sponsor a day at the cafe and we would promote you. So if you have a business, things like that. We do a lot of events. So we're always looking for business partners that want to donate silent auction items or want to sponsor an event. And that way, there's a lot of ways we do. Tonight we have a maker's night, so we make products that we sell in our retail space. So you can come and sit and use your hands. We have volunteer opportunities at the cafe, and that's all on our website. So there are a lot of ways to get involved for sure.
Very cool. And that's the storiesfoundation.org?
Yes.
Awesome. And that gets you to everything, because I know you've got a few different. Awesome.
Yes.
Okay. So while we wrap this up, I just wanted to ask if you had a word or a message of hope or encouragement for survivors out there that we could share.
Oh, I think don't give up. I think that's what I think. I think it's really easy for any of us, but especially when you're coming out of such a traumatizing place, and it really does feel like everything is against you. And honestly, from where I sit, it can feel like that too. Like everything is against this work and against these people. Specifically, the things that they have to overcome are mind-blowing, quite frankly. And yet I would say don't give up, because your story does matter and you are valuable and you are not alone. And that's what I would say. Don't give up. You are not alone.
So beautiful. All right. Well, thank you again, Stephanie Page, Executive Director of the Stories Foundation in Minnesota, fighting the good fight of human trafficking and exploitation. We are honored that you spent some time with us and enlightened us today. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. It's mine.
Thank you so much for joining us for this week's edition of the Savvy Leader Podcast. We were so glad to have you. Be sure to check out the SavvyLeadersLounge.com for further inspiration and resources to help you be the savvy leader you are always meant to be. See you next time.